1. I worked at a call center for a collection agency for nearly 5 years. Anybody that has worked in this type of environment knows that there are all sorts of targets that are expected to be met, be they daily, monthly, or whatever. One of our targets was to make a certain number of calls per day. I believe it was 120. Naturally, though, the more contact you would make with debtors, the less time there was to make other calls. It's usually not an issue, but some days you might make significantly more contact than others, and sometimes your call count might be like 2/3 of what it should be. We would get regular updates on the call count, and our manager would let us know if we were on track, and at the end of the day, they would give you the final results. I found it very annoying when you would have a successful day collecting debts and generating revenue for the company, only to have a manager dwell on your call count. Any protest of, yes, I didn't meet the call count requirement, but hey, look at the revenue I generated today, it doesn't matter. The target must be met. Even if it wasn't a successful day, but I knew I still ended up spending much more time in contact with those debtors. In an attempt to collect, I would ask managers to review my talk time, to see that the efforts were being made to do what we are hired to do. It doesn't matter. The requirement must be met. Now, to be clear, a call only counted if someone picked up, or the call went to a voicemail box that wasn't full. The system was unable to register events otherwise. Not in service, voicemail box full, rings out with no VM box or answer. Meaning, if you were to make hundreds of attempts in one day, only a fraction are registered. Everyone is aware of this, but it doesn't matter to the company. Well, I was tired of the unfairness of it all. It also doesn't help that the company was grossly skimming our bonuses that my department's client provided to us as a reward for successfully collecting on these debts. It was really obvious when our bonuses became random numbers, when it was only possible for them to be multiples of 5. Frustrated with this literal theft and underappreciation of successful collection, the whole point of the job, I decided to comply with the call count expectations and never be under the target again. I created a notepad file with a list of all the telephone numbers that went straight to voicemail. These are often numbers that have blocked us, or presumably the owner of the number set up as away or something. From then on, I made sure to make 15 to 20 calls per hour that would register, implying even more calls were being made that they just couldn't see due to the way the system registered calls. I would spread these calls out so my activity wouldn't seem suspicious, and would spend all day reading articles on the internet. Naturally, the revenue I'd been generating decreased by about 80%. How come you're not collecting? Well, manager, you can see I'm surpassing my count target, and my talk time is very low, so I'm just not getting the opportunities to do so. It should be noted that whatever I was collecting after doing so was really easy. The people whose accounts we received could pay and wanted to pay anyway. Often these people would call us, so I just relied on that to make it appear like I was doing anything at all. They started giving me lower value portfolios to work, which is fine by me. You are stealing my bonus, the very incentive I have to do more than the bare minimum anyway for a paycheck. I honestly thought I was quite quitting, but no, I had a reputation as a valued member of our department and company, so no one wanted to fire me. I guess they just chalked up my lack of success to the shit portfolios they were assigning me. Steal my bonuses and dwell on a target that would be better judged as a marker of effort, rather than end-all, be-all, and I couldn't care less. I was getting paid to read. This went on for nearly 2 years until I had to leave for mental health reasons. 2. My aunt was famous for her flan, a sort of Spanish creme caramel, and my mom kept asking for the recipe. Finally, in the 1990s, my aunt gave my mom the recipe, because my mom was tasked with dessert for Christmas that year. But my aunt altered the ingredients. The thing is, the change made for a tastier, eggier, smoother custard than the original recipe. It was, and still is, amazing. My aunt asked my mom for the recipe because she couldn't remember the proportions she had invented, and my mom has never given her the recipe. Everyone prefers my mom's flan now, and you might be wondering what the recipe is, so here it is. Half a cup of sugar, a heat-resistant mold for the flan, lidded if possible, 1 can of sweetened condensed milk, the same amount of whole milk, 2 Mexican cinnamon sticks, Ceylon cinnamon, 1 clove, lightly crushed, 1 teaspoon good vanilla extract. Optional, rind of 1/4 orange, only the rind, not the pith. You can replace with lemon if you like. Optional, a few drops of orange blossom water. 1 large egg, 4 egg yolks. Step 1. In a small saucepan, heat the sugar over a medium-high heat, stirring often until it melts and caramelizes. You want to have it a deep amber color. Remove from heat and pour into the bottom of the molds, coating evenly with a thin layer of caramel. Allow to cool. Caution: this is incredibly hot and will produce third-degree burns if it touches your skin, and will turn bitter quickly, so work fast. Step 2. In a small saucepan, heat both milks with the cinnamon sticks, cloves, orange rind. Move, constantly scraping the bottom with a wooden spoon, to avoid scorching the milk. When it begins to rise from boiling, lower the heat and simmer for 3 minutes. Remove from heat. Add the vanilla and orange blossom water and allow to cool. Step 3. Once cooled to room temperature, strain the mixture through a fine strainer and mix in the blender with egg and egg yolks. Step 4. Pour this mixture into your mold. Cover it with its lid if you have one, or make a lid with aluminium foil if not. Leave 1 centimeter, a little less than ½ an inch, of headspace between the liquid and the rim of your mold. Step 5. Put the mold in a pressure cooker with enough water to cover the bottom of the mold by 2 centimeters, and turn on. Use the low pressure setting if your cooker is modern. I use the egg mode, which is useless for eggs but useful for this. As soon as the cooker is under pressure, cook for 10 minutes. Step 6. Turn off the cooker and cool the lid with cold dishcloths to release pressure quickly. Open as soon as it's safe for you to do so. Cool to room temperature. Step 7. Refrigerate overnight. Step 8. To unmold, place a deep dish on 2 to collect the caramel sauce and very quickly turn over with a firm shake. It is helpful to watch some tutorials on how to do this. The flan should release and fall into the deep dish, with the caramel sauce pooling around it. Serve immediately. Sometimes the flan breaks, so practice. 3. For starters, I work as a security guard for one of the few hospitals in our city. Besides dealing with combative patients and visitors and doing patrols around the campus, we occasionally get asked to assist with people getting out of their vehicles and escort them by wheelchair to the emergency department or their appointment at an on-site clinic. Today, a couple of nurses came to our office asking for help. They had received a call from a gentleman, Gerald, asking for help to get out of their car as he was in severe pain. I went out with the nurses, pushing a wheelchair and radioing my partner to come assist, as it sounded like it was going to take some extra hands to help him out. It took a little bit for us to find him, but we found him thanks to him blowing his car horn for all to hear. Now, I have interacted with dramatic people before, and this guy was no different. He told us all about how he was in so much pain, how he drove himself all the way over here and couldn't move the car anymore, and how he needed to be treated. We tried to offer help, but he refused to grab our arms or hands to steady himself, relying on the car door and the wheelchair to get himself in it. Once he got himself settled, he asked me to move the vehicle to a better parking spot. After all, he had disabled stickers and he needed the space to get in when he finished his visit here. So I obliged, feeling a little bit odd about the whole situation, and moved his car to the right spot near the emergency department entrance. Gerald got checked in at the emergency department, and we were done with the situation. At least that's what I thought. Boy, were we wrong. Not even 20 minutes later, I got told that this guy wanted to leave and wanted us to take him back to his car. Apparently, he started complaining and moaning about how the wait time was too long. Keep in mind that there were people in the waiting room who had been there for hours. The emergency department was very full today, and this guy couldn't stand being there for even a few minutes. I first checked with the staff because I was worried about the fact that he himself said he couldn't drive. They told me that since they hadn't triaged him and he wanted to leave so soon, they legally couldn't hold him here, even if they wanted to, which they didn't care that much since they were already busy with treating their patients. So I went back out to the emergency department and asked him point blank if he was really sure he wanted to leave. Because I didn't want to be held responsible in case he drove and got into an accident, but he said yes. He wanted to leave right then and right now, so I reluctantly pushed out of the emergency department towards his car. This is where my malicious compliance begins. Gerald starts saying verbatim,
"When we get to my car, I'm gonna call in the ambulance."
Wait, what?
"Yeah, gonna call an ambulance. I can't drive, and I don't like everyone here except you. They're too slow, and I'm not spending all night here. Besides, calling an ambulance will get me to a room quicker, and I can get help with my pain."
So you want to call an ambulance to take you to the emergency department when you're already here at an emergency department. And all because the wait time is too long for you.
Yep.
You realize that if you call an ambulance, they may just take you back to the waiting area and have you wait there, right?
Yeah, I know that. I'm still gonna call.
Well, okay, if that's what you want to do. So, after helping the guy into his car, I decided to let him do just that. At that point, there was nothing else I could really do. After all, I'm just a security guard, not his doctor. So I just pushed the wheelchair back inside and went about my business. About 30 minutes later, I'm looking at CCTV footage, and right there, next to this guy's car, is an ambulance. My jaw dropped. The guy actually called 911 for an ambulance, and they came. I continued to watch as the EMT workers helped this guy into a gurney and placed him into the ambulance. Then, to my utter shock, they drove off campus. I had thought that they were going to drop him back off here, but they freaking left for another hospital. I then realized a couple of things. One, this guy is going to another hospital and going to be gone for who knows how long. Two, when he gets discharged, he's going to have a ride because, you guessed it, his car is over here at this hospital. Plus, our policy is that if a car is parked in our lot for a few days and we've confirmed that the owner is not here, we have to call the police and report an abandoned vehicle. So this guy's now getting additional costs added to his medical expenses because he took the ambulance, possibly having to wait even more in the emergency department of another hospital before being seen, and may rack up some fines for abandoning his car depending on how long he's there. All because he didn't want to wait in the emergency department with everyone else. But hey, guess 20 minutes was way too much for him. Update. Just found out the car was taken early this morning, so no car fines for this guy. 4. This comes from about over 15 years ago, when I was and still am working with people with disabilities in a community home. It's a great job for those who like it, a terrible one for those who don't, meaning that any staff you meet are either very new or long-term like myself. As a consequence, the turnover rate of staff is high, and replacement staff are slow to be hired, meaning you often find shifts not covered straight away. This is an industry where simply not having a shift filled isn't an option, particularly where I work, in a house with a single day staff and a single night staff, each working 12 shifts on a 7-day spread over 2 weeks roster. There are some strict rules regarding hours you can work, indeed to avoid burnout, but more used to keep rein over time, which in our industry paid plus 70% of your hourly rate for the first 3 hours above your 76-hour fortnightly maximum, and plus 100 for any time after that. You can't demand overtime, but if they require you to work longer, they can't not pay you overtime. Also worth noting is that the people we work with are vulnerable, meaning they cannot be left unsupervised. Long story short, you can't go home until your replacement arrives. So back in the early 2000s, we were having problems locating staff, lots of people working overtime, and a lot of fresh faces appearing and disappearing. The house I worked in wasn't difficult in particular, for adults with intellectual disability, but there was no support, by which I mean the worker there had to fend for themselves. There was no supervisor in the next building. They were miles and miles away. I'd frequently at this time have to stay back half an hour, waiting for staff to come to replace me. I was less than happy with the way it was handled each time. I called the office to tell them, "The night staff haven't arrived. Do you know who's booked?" To which I'd get the reply, "We're still looking. How late can you stay?" The obvious answer was, "Until I'm replaced," but what I often said was, "I prefer not to stay after the end of my shift. But that doesn't seem to matter now, so I'll stay here until someone comes." Each time a new face arrived, I'd give them all the information they'd need for the shift, introduce them, walk them through their duties, etc. This would take 20 to 30 minutes. The point being is I don't just jump shift when staff arrives to replace me. This is someone's home, and I like them. So I'm not going to leave them in the hands of someone uninformed. Cut to that weekend. My roster had me working 12-hour days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Come Friday night, my replacement didn't arrive. I waited. I sent a text message to the supervisor. After 15 minutes, then called after 30. Left a message, and when they eventually called back, I could tell they had not found a replacement. I told them I'd stay until they did. This was by that time an hour after I was meant to finish 10 p.m. Come 11, they call and say they simply can't find a replacement. They offer a deal and say if I stay and do the night shift, I can take the next shift off. "It's pretty even, so you won't miss out," they said. Then they changed their tone and said, "It's really not a request, we have no other option. Treat this as a direction." I reminded them it was a passive house, meaning you got half the hourly rate for midnight, but you could sleep in a bed provided, so I'd actually be taking a pay cut. They didn't know what else they could do, so I made a suggestion. I'd stay and do the night shift, but I wasn't going to give up my next shift. I was going to do that one as well. They agreed. It meant they didn't need to find a replacement for me in the morning, so they thought it was a good deal for them. It was, however, an even better deal for me. It took a few emails over the weekend with the union to sort out the particulars, but what happened was this. Once I couldn't leave my work site because of a lack of replacement, I was on overtime. As this overtime was because of a direction, not voluntary, it remained in place until I went home. Because I didn't agree to drop my following shift, my overtime continued till I ended on Saturday night. The upshot being that working 36 hours in a row resulted in the equivalent of 60 hours pay. I was the first person to, as they say, pull this stunt, and word got around that if you didn't get replaced, you were actually the person who was in a position of power. It didn't take long until the department put a little more effort into training and employing extra staff. So something like this never happened again. Not at least to me. 5. This happened in 2011, so most of it is from my memory. I was renting a condo unit in a very nice neighborhood. The landlord, John, was very nice. I didn't know his day job, just that he was in the finance domain. This unit was his investment home. I leased the condo for a year, maybe 2010 to April 2011. John would come to collect rent on the 1st of every month. He preferred cash, and I had no issues paying him in cash. He never bothered me at any other time. Once I had a plumbing issue, I called him and he promptly sent a plumber to fix it. Basically, our relationship was amicable. In January 2011, my company wanted me to move to another location in a neighboring state. I am into IT and needed to guide a project team that was to start in March. I negotiated with my manager to move around the end of April, after my current lease expired. I informed John that I will not renew the lease, and he was cool with it. In February, a mutual friend, Peter, came by my house and immediately fell in love with the neighborhood. He asked me if I knew of any condos that were available for rent. I told him I was planning to vacate by the end of April, and if he was interested, I could talk to my landlord for him. I also gave him John's number. That evening, I called up John and told him my friend is interested in renting the unit and can rent it from May 2011. I also gave him Peter's number to communicate directly. John thanked me, and that was that. Around the first week of March, my wife's cousin's marriage got finalized. The wedding date was the 7th of April. We are from India, and marriages are a big thing where all the family and relatives get together for several days. There was no way in hell that my wife would miss it. We decided that she would travel to India with my 4-year-old son. I would go to the new office location, and by the time they come back from India sometime in May, I would have everything set in the new place. We booked the flight tickets for my wife and son. Their flight was 4 or 5 days before the wedding. When my manager came to know that I will be alone after April 2nd, he pushed me to join the new office on April 3rd. Those days, working remotely was not considered efficient, but I wanted a few days to pack as I was moving to another state. I booked a mover to come on April 11th with all things taken care of from my side. I informed John around the middle of March that I was planning to release the condo on April 11th. John thanked me, and that was that. I called Peter and told him I would be leaving earlier in April. By then, John had discussed the rent with him, and they had both signed the lease agreement. Peter was to move in on the 1st of May 2011. Since I will be gone starting April 11th, Peter asked me if he could move in from April 15th instead. I did not have any objections. I asked him to inform John. Peter checked with John, and John agreed over the phone. Peter called back and updated me. I never thought of asking Peter for half the rent. I knew he would be paying rent for the whole month for his old apartment, and my apartment would be vacant anyway. On April 1st, John called me and collected the rent in the evening. He asked me how things were going and if I needed any help. I thanked him and declined his help. I asked if he could come by in the evening after 6 p.m. of the 11th for an inspection and to collect the keys. I was impressed with John for offering help and thought him to be a decent guy. Little did I know that he had ulterior motives. He was making sure that I was leaving by the 11th. After collecting the rent, he went home and called up Peter. He wanted to adjust the lease dates to start the lease on April 15th. John was sly enough to wait till he got the rent from me, and then wanted to collect the rent again from Peter. Peter signed it, but did not tell me until a few days later. When I heard this, I was livid. I asked Peter, "When did you sign the new lease?" As I suspected, John had called Peter the night of April 1st, after collecting the rent from me. They signed the new lease the next day, April 2nd. I called John and asked him to pay me back the rent for half the month, as he was already charging it from Peter. He said,
"No can do. You've signed the lease until the end of the month."
I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember his exact words now. I was mad, but he had a point. And with so many things to take care of during the move, on top of the hectic work schedule at the time, I couldn't even think I had the time to take any action against him. Normally, I'm not a vengeful guy, but I wanted John to pay, and not necessarily monetarily. I stewed over it for a day or two, and suddenly an idea came to my mind, and I thought of giving it a shot. I waited until the 10th, and on the evening of April 10th, I called John and told him that he will not need to come for the inspection the next evening, as I changed my mind. I will be moving out on the 28th of April instead. John became quiet for a few seconds, and he said,
But you were planning to move out tomorrow."
"Yes, but I have the lease until the end of the month, so I am planning to take it slow." It was a taste of the same bitter medicine that he gave me. Then I nicely said good night and disconnected the call. I don't know what was going on in John's mind, but he must have been pretty scared about the lease he had signed with Peter. As per the lease, Peter had a right to move in from April 15th. But I had already paid for the whole month, and I am within my rights to stay till the end of the month. If I didn't vacate, Peter could take him to court. The next morning, the day of the move, John called me on the dot at 7 a.m. He asked me if I would consider moving sooner if he paid me part of the rent. I said yes. The poor guy materialized in a minute. It turns out he was waiting outside in his car to meet me if I agreed. John handed me an envelope. I counted the money, and I was a little confused. There was $800 in it. My monthly rent at that time was $1,250, and I would have settled for $625 or less. This was early in the morning, and I was thinking of the movers and 100 other things that needed to be taken care of that day. I was not prepared to interact with John, and we did not even talk about money the previous night. I did not expect him to come over with the money, and that too, so suddenly. I started feeling sorry for the poor guy and was thinking of returning the extra 175, but he spoke too soon. He wanted to know, in a demanding voice, if I was going to vacate the condo that evening, as I had previously communicated. I realized he did not deserve my compassion. I wanted to spite him and tell him, no can do. But I did not escalate it and said, yes, come in the evening for inspection. The whole day was hectic, but the movers cleared up the house promptly. I had a few other things to take care of and a few things to donate. The evening comes, and John was there at exactly 6 p.m. He did not inspect anything, collected the keys, handed me a check. Returning the full amount of the security deposit I gave at the beginning of the lease signing, and went away. No thank you or goodbye. It felt a bit weird, but there were 800 reasons to ignore that feeling. I was a bit puzzled by the way he gave me 800 instead of 625. I calculated later and assumed that he paid me back for 19 days, that I would not be on the property, which comes to 692. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 267. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please poke the like button if you'd be so good. And we actually have 2 birthday shoutouts to do today. The first one goes to Enza, and that comes from your girlfriend Genevieve. I hope you have a great day today. I hope you both have a great day today celebrating your birthday. And hopefully I'll see you pop in for Forewarned at some point. Not sure if it's going to be this weekend. No, actually, I think it will be this weekend. And also the next one goes to Alex. And I believe Alex is 30 this year, so a very happy 30th birthday to you, Alex. I hope you have a great time. And as is required, you both have to celebrate your birthdays for the whole month, just to make sure you get as much birthday celebrating in as possible. And of course, I'd love to sing happy birthday to both of you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Enza. Dear Alex. Happy birthday to you. Let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: name a movie title that changes dramatically when you add or change just one letter. Like Snakes on a Planet, which is really just a nature documentary hosted by Samuel L. Jackson. Or that classic 1970s movie Star Wars, about a guy who goes around the world just, causing ruckuses. And lastly, Dude, Where's My Bar? About a bar owner who gets so drunk one night testing a new beer, and he spends the rest of the movie trying to get back home. Leave some of your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.